Welcome to Ask A Butch. I'm Sheena and I'm joined today by Lise and Amy, both women who identify as butch. We're here to bust the butch myths and to make butch women more accessible in the community and outside of the community. Because let's face it, butch women probably get more flack than most other lesbians. There is also a lot of misperceptions around it. So what we're doing in this season of Ask A Butch is we are looking at listener questions. And today's listener question is, what's the best way to find out what someone's identity is? Now, I assume that this question is looking for an answer other than go up and ask them. All right, so ladies, what do you have to say on this matter? Anyone?
We're fighting to make sure who gets to answer this question first.
Frankly, I don't necessarily care how someone identifies. It's not important for me to know which bucket I'm going to put them in. I mean, yes, I'm probably going to stick them in some mental bucket because we're human and that's what we do. But I don't really care necessarily, which sounds like a cop-out.
It's difficult because I think that, especially visually, human beings visually categorize people. So if I see that you look butch, mentally I'm saying you're butch. And now later on, when you tell me that you're not butch, I might be surprised. But, that's one of those things where I'm not really going to tell you you're wrong. I mean, but as far as asking, first of all, I don't necessarily know that it's necessary to ask somebody if they are butch or femme.
Okay, so I have a scenario for you guys that puts this into some sort of context. I think that this question comes from a woman who's relatively recently come out or discovered that she's lesbian or has started to kind of delve into the various lesbian sectors, because it's reminiscent for me of when I first came out and I started reading lesbian fiction and I discovered that there's all these different subcategories of lesbian, if you like. In fact, just the other day we were talking about different types of butch women. And I mean, even now still, I don't quite comprehend all the different types of butch women because I think it's very much something that happens in the States more than anywhere else in the world. So I think it's coming from this place of, I've just discovered I'm lesbian. I'm trying to categorize myself in the world. How do I know where I fit in? How do I know where other people fit in? That's, I think, where this is coming from.
I can see that. I could see, somebody new wanting to know. But, in a case like that, and that's kind of very specific, but in a case like that, my suggestion would be, I'm kind of new to all this. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about yourself and how you identify? And that's important, the do you mind part. Okay? Mm-hmm. But then you run into, unless you're in an area where you know that the person that you're about to question is gay. I mean, you can't go up to somebody that you don't know and ask them that, because what happens if they're straight and they're looking at you like, what, you're telling me I look gay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially in rural areas where you have a lot more farming and stuff that goes on, a lot of women will dress in a way that is appropriate for the work that they are doing, which if you saw someone dressed up like that in the big city, you'd be like, oh, she's totally queer.
My people!
Out in that rural area, though, she may just be dressed for work. And she may have short hair because it's more convenient for what it is that she does. And yeah, she's going to be a little weirded out when you're like, hey, are you a butch?
So I think that that's important to know, that the person that that the person you're asking is gay or identifies as a different type of sexuality. Now, how are you going to know that unless you ask? Well, that's kind of situation specific. I mean, if you're at a mixer for lesbians or for the LGBT community where there's a lot of people there that you would expect to be gay, then yes, go ahead and ask. But, if you find a woman out on a tractor in the field, probably don't ask.
here's my thing, which, okay, as part of my background, this is from someone who is pretty shy in real life and has had some bad experiences with people knowing that I'm queer. I don't ask, which is a problem because my gaydar is notoriously terrible.
I live in the Midwest, and we have a lot of those women that are straight, but you like ping your gaydar.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to err on the side of thinking people are straight here because that's more likely.
Because you don't want to get beaten up.
Yeah. But
yeah, so it's for.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, for me,
because
it's a lot of.
Interrupting you. Still.
All right.
Still interrupting.
So for me, it's a lot of like nonverbal and contextual clues, like you were talking about, and getting to know people and not rushing in assuming that someone is gay, but sort of peeling back those layers until either they're ready to reveal it to you because they're like, oh, she looks like a gigantic dyke, I'm safe with her, or because you've gotten to know each other long enough that she trusts you. And unfortunately, if you're trying to like make your way in the lesbian community because you're new to it, it's a long way in. But for me, it was the safest way in because I had been beaten up for being who I am. So it tends to make me a little gun shy, as it were. And I know that's probably not the answer that this person wants to hear. And, you know, things are probably a lot different now than when I was coming out. You know, maybe you don't have to worry so much about getting the wrong person angry and getting punched in the face. But I sure did when I was coming out.
You also don't want to shove people out of the closet. I had this happen to me where people kept outing me and I was not at all ready to be outed. In fact, it made me want to get back in the closet.
Mm.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready within my own self. I certainly wasn't ready to tell the world. So don't do that to other people.
And I'm gonna say that
I think your dog agrees with me.
in answer to this question, I actually went and asked some young people.
Oh, research. Yay!
Yes, research. They were around early to late 20s. And what I did was ask, you know, how they would handle asking people questions like that. And their answer was basically that they would go up to them and ask, which I thought was kind of intrusive, to tell you the truth. But there's, I think, today a bit more openness and acceptance in that age group, and so they feel more comfortable asking. Now, the one that I asked, and I think that one of the biggest questions now for this is about trans people. How to figure out, you know, how you address somebody who's trans. How do you figure out if they are trans? You know, and in my research, I actually had a trans person to ask, and a trans person's girlfriend to ask. So the girlfriend said that her experience with trans people is to go up to them and ask what pronoun they prefer, how they like to be addressed. And that to me was interesting that they felt, because this was actually in a church setting that she did this, and the trans man was very grateful. He said that she was the first person who had asked him and who had spoken to him, and I think that that's because everybody else is uncomfortable. Everybody's worried that by asking they're going to offend, or they're going to get into an uncomfortable place and they don't know how to deal with it. And so that was her response, is that to just simply go and ask. Now, the trans woman that I spoke to was more interesting to me because she said that she's not out to everybody. And she's actually, I think that the group that I was with was the only people that she was out to. So she said that if somebody came up to her and asked, she would be extremely uncomfortable because that would be making her out herself. And she's not comfortable doing that yet.
Yeah, you see, this is very much the same sort of thing as what I was going through, because I knew quite early on that I was probably gay because girls were way more attractive to me than guys, and I was just drawn to them. And it wasn't until I was like 19 that I was even willing to look at the possibility that I was gay, though. And if somebody had come to me and asked me, in fact, when they did do it, I just straight out refused to even acknowledge or talk about it because I wasn't ready.
It's facing a lot of rejection, or a lot of possible rejection.
Mm-hmm. And the rejection, it gets built up in your mind so that to the point where even with people that you are fairly certain this won't be an issue to, it's still incredibly hard, which I think is something that straight people don't understand because they never have to confront that particular set of circumstances.
Well, and it's also because as an other, you hear the stories of people that love you and people that, are supposed to be there for you, and they are, until they find this out about you, and then all of a sudden it's a 180 and you're rejected and you're thrown out and you're kicked out of the fold or whatever. And so that means that you can never trust anybody's reaction.
Right. And on the flip side, I mean, they don't know that you are, so you get to hear their unguarded opinions on things. So, for example, somebody in your family can point to a woman that you think is actually pretty hot and say, this is why I don't want you doing X, because you'll end up looking like her. And that's like oh God, well, if they think that about that person, what are they going to think when I tell them, but I want to be like her?
So really, it's not a one scenario fits all kind of space. It's a case-by-case basis, and it's whether or not somebody's already out of the closet.
There's never a one scenario fits all, ever, for any question.
I disagree with you. Here's my one scenario fits all. Lesbians are awesome. There you go.
Well, in this case, talking to these two people, you're correct. That is a one scenario fits all.
I have met some pretty crappy lesbians, though.
Shh, you'll ruin my illusion here.
Yeah, I have too, but I'd say on the whole, I'd probably prefer crappy lesbians to crappy straight people.
Oh, absolutely.
On the other hand, I will say that I prefer awesome straight people to crappy lesbians.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's awesome that there are lesbians, but not all lesbians are awesome.
I agree with that one.
Okay, fine. Shatter my illusions. Why don't you? Thank you both for joining me today. It's been such a blast talking to you. And as always, I think you make excellent points. You've been listening to Ask A Butch. I'm Sheena, and I've been joined today by Lise and Amy. You can find their contact information in the show notes. If you enjoy this show and would like to hear more of these kinds of exciting shows, then consider becoming a patron. You can find us at patreon.com, that's patreon.com/The Lesbian Talk Show. Patrons get exclusive content and other fun things. That's all for this week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.